Real esoteric spirituality without all of the fluff, without all of the nonsense. This is the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. Click subscribe and then hit the little bell button so that you can be notified whenever I've uploaded a video or when I'm doing the live Q&A videos.
Welcome to the Church of Mavis radio show. It's Friday night. It's 7:04 p.m. Central. Jay's here with us. How's it going, Jay?
It's going pretty good for you, except for my laptop being down. I'm doing all right, I guess.
All right. Well, you listen to United Public Radio, 107.7 FM, New Orleans. Next week's guest is Joe Montaldo. So that'll be next week's show. That you're here for that, aren't you, Jay?
Yes, I am.
All righty. Well, it's been a long week. I just came back from Alabama to Florida, and it's just been a long week. But I'm alive, and I'm here, and I'm propped up with a stick, but we're going to rock and roll. Tonight's guest, Michael Denney. How's it going, Michael? Good to have you here. Say your name one good time for us.
Yes, Michael William Denney. It's going great. Thank you for inviting me on your show. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
It's great to have you on. I came across your channel on YouTube and watched a lot of your videos and just figured, what the hey, try to get you on, and here you are. So thank you. It's great to have you here. Appreciate it.
My privilege.
Well, I guess give us a little bit of background about yourself just for our listeners, an origin, so to speak.
Well, I grew up like a lot of people in the U.S. I grew up in, staunch, born-again Christian home, did all that. When I was a young man, I went off to be a preacher, went off to Bible college, and long story short, I decided I did not like organized religion. And then I started searching. And I went through some searching of some esoteric studies from things all over the world, including Africa, China, India, all those kinds. I won't get into all the stuff that I trained in, but at some point about 10 years ago, I started looking at the myths of my ancestors, which are of Norse heritage. My last name, Denney, actually means Danish. So I'm descended from those Vikings that came over to England and caused all those problems. Back then, who you were was your last name. It's like, oh, that guy, the Danish, so that's who I was. In any case, I started looking at the Norse mythology, and I started finding out that in the Norse mythology is coded instructions for things that I learned in Chinese mysticism, in East Indian mantra, in understanding the 8 directions and the 9 worlds. And because of that background, I knew how to decode some of the secret language in there that they understood, 1,000 years ago, that we no longer understand. And so what ended up happening is I put together this syncretic knowledge that I have now. And I honor my ethnic ancestors because I do believe that we do gain knowledge directly from our ethnic ancestors. But I also have come to the realization through my meditations that the masters, the ascended masters of all ethnicities and cultures and religions all over the world are wanting to bring together all of the knowledge that we have accumulated over the thousands of years. And as a result, this is the time that we can move up to the next level of our evolution. And so I'm just doing my part. So things like, we can talk about things like the Weird, W-Y-R-D, which was the ancient understanding of what we would call fate and destiny. But those are the things that I found incredibly exciting. And to be honest, what it did is it completed my training. It completed my training in all of the other disciplines that I was doing, and it's sort of a capstone. So I hope that's what you were looking for. There's
yes.
a little An intro on you right there.
I grew up in Georgia, so I have Christian roots, and I still study it on some level, but I have pullings towards Norse and American Indian and shamanism and stuff like that, and I've done lots of shows and studied a lot about it. But I don't consider myself an expert or anything, but I definitely, have immersed myself in it with a lot of guests. And I guess, I understand what you mean. There's a lot of crazy when it comes to religion on so many levels, worldwide. But I still feel something when I, study it on some level. But have you found that with Christianity, for instance, that there is a truth there? And I know sometimes my problem with trying to maintain Christianity is like a lot of the politicians and stuff. They're crazy. They're like Antichrist. They're completely Antichrist. They're like reading the Bible to poor people while they urinate on them practically. But what are how do you feel about Christianity? Do you think there's truth there? Or?
It depends on how one takes it. If somebody wants to be a fundamentalist about it, then you're going to have real problems. Because there are just some things that you can't prove. You just can't. And in fact, they're very easy to disprove. And I'll give you one example. And I don't know, some of your listeners may, find this offensive if they happen to be Christians. But this is just one example. In the New Testament, Jesus is called Jesus of Nazareth. And there's all this story about him, being raised in Nazareth and all of that good stuff. But according to objective archaeology and history, the town of Nazareth was not even founded until around 200 years after Jesus' supposed crucifixion. So those kinds of things cause problems if you're a fundamentalist. If, however, you are looking at it in a more philosophical, more of a mythological understanding, then you've got a lot more freedom. And then, of course, you're going to find truths in it. Some of the most profound truths come out of that. And, of course, some of the most ridiculous nonsense comes out of it as well. So, again, that's my own personal take. I do a lot of talk about that on my channel. But, at the risk of offending people, I won't go too deep into it.
I understand. Well, that's me. I try not to let the hypocrites turn me away from it, but I certainly don't feel like I'm someone that goes around trying to ram it down everybody's throats. One of my big things that I study a lot is ufology. I've had weird UFO stuff. To me, some of the information in that subject is the truth. That's like the go-to place to me. Who would know more than anything than weird dudes in a craft flying around? And there's a lot of weird info. And just recently, the Navy released the guidelines to how to report UFOs after pilots got together and complained because they weren't taking it serious anymore. And of course, there's been several programs out about that subject, from Project Blue Book, which is on, the Alan Hynek thing that's on History Channel. And then, of course, they admitted recently in league with that Tom DeLonge, another program. So, that's kind of a go-to place for me. So I guess it's kind of like Christianity, Norse, shamanism, UFOs, which is
right. What I have done, listen, I don't care about anything if I can't practically use it. I have no interest in intellectual knowledge in and of itself. It means nothing to me. If I can't do something with it, if I can't verify it in my practical life, it's meaningless to me. And so if Norse mythology was nothing more than cute stories, I wouldn't be interested in it. But just out of curiosity, have you ever experienced or seen an alien yourself?
I have seen different types of beings all my life since I was healed from cancer at 17 for chemo science. I had testicular cancer, and I had to go through chemo, and I'm fine now. But it was a long time ago. But I believe that experience opened my senses. And then after that, a few years later, my dad passed, and I began to see ghost-type entities, shadows. I've seen beings of light all my life with my physical eye, completely sober. That's one of the big ones, or the beings of light. I've seen them leave my house. I've seen them in the heavens, and I've asked shamans about those, and I get different answers and everything. Yeah. But there's a few others that I've seen. One time I saw some little cloaked beings standing around a black box in the wilderness with a friend, and we were both like, "Do you see that? Do you see that?" We both saw it, and a cat pounced and they vanished. But yeah, I've seen some odd beings, and I'm not sure exactly what they are, but I've definitely seen them.
I've only had one experience, and this was a long time ago, and this was when I was training deep into Taoist esoteric mysticism, and it was very loopy, the kind of stuff. It was kind of hard to stay in, this dimension. But I remember having a lucid dream where I swear I saw one of those beings peeking from around behind my door, staring at me, sort of like, and the feeling was like, it was looking at me like, where did this guy come from? Like whatever I was doing had set off some kind of, vibration that they came to just check it out. Who is this guy? He's playing around with some energy, and that's my only experience with UFOs. But I was just curious about your experience since you brought it up.
Was it one of the typical like gray alien type situations?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
It was a gray, yeah.
Definitely. Well, I've always had an interest in Norse just because it spawned fantasy on so many levels, from Lord of the Rings to Game of Thrones. It's like the real fantasy time on Earth that happened, really, and it spawned the genre, so to speak. So that interests me a lot about it. But I did my DNA and found out I had a lot too. And it's funny, on Ancestry they're like Great Britain, but Viking invasion right next to it. so that seems like, and you see that Viking intermingling everywhere now. It's like all over the place. So I have a lot of it too. So and I've watched Vikings a lot. I know that's not historically accurate, and Last Kingdom and stuff. So and I have a lot of books on it. So I have an interest in it. But one thing I didn't, I came across was Norse, shamanism, and I've had Evelyn Rysdeck on, and there's been some others, but that just the fact that those two can connect on an those interconnected is just fascinating. I like to read a lot about that and hear that.
With some of the most interesting things that I discovered was I went and looked at the etymology, the history of the words of the deities in Viking religion, Norse religion. And on the surface, some of them don't look at all the same. And I'll give you my favorite example, because I am the Thunder Wizard. By the way, in case anybody's interested, thunderwizard.com is my YouTube channel and my website. But the thunder god in India, the Vedic thunder god, his name is Indra, and it comes from three words: In, Thu, Ra. In means full or bright. Thu means drop of water, which is associated with thunder. And then Ra means king. So he is the king of the full moon. Interesting, the god Thor, his name is actually Thu Nar. So you have that same root of Thu, and the Nar suffix means the lord of, or the source of. So he is lord of the moon, whereas Indra is lord of the full moon. And what's interesting is it's the same language, separated by thousands of years. And so what we're looking at is not just Norse religion. We're looking at the original religion that was among the first that was brought up into the Northern Hemisphere and spread all over. And today, the only people that still practice the original Indo-European religion without any break is what we call the Hindus now, who are descended from the Vedics. But what I love is the idea of finding the synchronicity between all of it. And I could get into it, but there's even the god for the king of heaven in China is the same god for the king of heaven in the Indo-European religions as well, and it's the same word. It's the same word. It's really interesting. So that part really excites me. When we're not just talking about people sort of sitting around, oh, these people over here sitting around thinking this up, and those people thinking that up. This is actually a science, a spiritual science that has been handed down, I believe, from the ascended masters, from the gods, from whatever words you want to use, to human beings. And so that's what's really exciting to me about this. This is actually an energetic science. And if we can really understand and unlock what's in that, my personal belief is it holds the key to human evolution, to transcend, to go to the next level. And so I'm hoping that I can have a part in that someday.
Definitely, and that's definitely fascinating, and the knowledge of it is, I've felt, the energy studying it. Well, one of my questions I was wondering, I know a lot of the Vikings intermingled, I guess, with what Great Britain, and kind of what was the deal with some of them becoming Christians? Did they do that just to get land? Or do you actually think they did that, or they just said we're going to act like this and grab the land? I've kind of wondered about that because I've noticed when I study Christianity in Norse, there's kind of like I don't know if it's a conflict. You just kind of feel like with
Yeah.
Christianity, if you study anything else, it's like there's some kind of, you're supposed to feel some kind of guilt just for doing it. But like I had a spiritual warfare minister, Bill Bean, on recently, and he said knowledge is power. It made me feel a little bit better about that. But I mean, I've immersed myself in studying Norse a lot and felt those energies, but I've also noticed a lot of things with Christianity. One being lately, and since he told me that they took out Yahweh out of the Bible, out of the scriptures, and replaced it with Lord, I've been using Yahweh more, and I've definitely noticed some spiritual warfare type situations with that. But I try to be careful with spiritual warfare and demonic stuff, because if you look throughout history with Christianity, there's some lunacy there on so many levels, from the burning times to the Crusades. So discernment has got to definitely be a big issue. But when it comes to the Vikings, like, what was it, Great Britain that they intermingled with, and they had to become Christians? Is there a truth to that historically?
Yeah, well, yeah, there is. It was a process. What I found interesting was what isn't written in the history books, but if you just do a little bit of sleuthing, you find out what caused the Viking invasions to begin with. So what was happening is that for 400 years after the fall of the Roman Empire, Christianity had been spreading, and it wasn't a peaceful spreading. We were led to believe that it was this peaceful, and people just decided to turn over to Christianity, but it wasn't peaceful at all. It was actually done with the sword, and people being put to death and tortured and all kinds of other things. And there was an attack on a city in southern Germany called Verden, and you can look it up. It's called the Massacre of Verden, and it was Charlemagne's troops who he wanted to bring them into his kingdom, and they wanted to be part of his kingdom. They just didn't want to convert to Christianity. And so what happened is that Charlemagne took his troops up there, and he offered them a peace meeting. Now, in order to understand how insidious this was, the peace meeting in pre-Christian Europe meant that when somebody says, I want a peace meeting with you, you're bound by honor not to bring any weapons. If you bring weapons to a peace meeting, you are seen as a traitor and a coward. It's the worst possible thing you could be. So all of these chieftains from all over southern Germany show up to this meeting thinking they're going to have a peace meeting. And Charlemagne brought all of his troops with all of their weapons, and they cut off everybody's head and forced them to accept Christianity. And they said the rivers ran with blood. Now, that is clear historical knowledge. We understand that. But what we don't know is that I believe it was 7 years after that was the first attack by the Vikings onto the British shore. And what they did is they came in and attacked not just a village of people, they attacked the church. And I believe that was, they were sending a message. They thought they were fighting a religious war for their independence. And so, yeah, for a long time, that's why you had this conflict between Christianity and paganism. And that's actually, I'm wearing a Thor's hammer. That's why they created this Thor's hammer, because they wanted something to separate themselves from who they believed to be the Christian usurpers. But yeah, in order to be part of society, they blended in. And as happens in all kinds of historical situations, you have the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation. They're not connected to what brought them over here. They're part of this society. They want to fit in. They want to be able to, buy and sell. And so, yeah, it was a slow process. The Vikings were very practical people. They had no problem assimilating into any culture and any religion if it served them. So I think you're right. Over time, that's what happened in England. It happened in France. Then it happened in they even went to Arabia. So there's probably people in Arabia who have Norse ancestry in their blood. But yeah, it comes down to being able to live, and you're indoctrinated into what surrounds you, and so I think that's what did it. But the beginning part of it, my belief is that there was a Holocaust, and it was not just a Holocaust in terms of killing people, but it was also a religious Holocaust and a cultural Holocaust, because our thinking has completely shifted. And at some point later we can talk about weird, which is one of the things that hasn't left our language, but that was one of the things that Christianity couldn't get rid of. In any case, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's
you did. Thank you. There's this book that I like by Paul Anderson. I think it's War of the Gods or something, but the Vikings in there say follow your weird, and I'm trying to use that in something I'm creating right now, but they say follow your weird.
Yeah.
I love it. But what is it about that? When you say it, do you mean WYRD?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's what they say. Okay.
So there are a lot of words that were part of the Viking religion that were you couldn't separate people from them, and the church was very good at getting rid of most of them. They couldn't get rid of the gods' names in the days of the week, for example. Monday, the day of the moon; Tuesday, the day of God, the god Tu; Thursday, Thursday. Thursday's Thursdays. Wednesday was Woden's day. But one of the words that has not been erased from our language is the word weird. And we spell it W-E-I-R-D, but it was originally spelled W-Y-R-D. And it was pronounced exactly the same way as we say it now, weird. And weird was loosely translated, we call it destiny, but it's much more deep than that. It actually contains all of the laws of, like the laws of karma, the laws of dharma, the law of manifestation. And weird is known as a web. Weird actually means that which has been woven. That's the actual translation of it. And so in the mythology, we have three giantesses, which is really another word for saying titans, goddesses that are so powerful, even the gods themselves must obey them. And these three giantesses are responsible for weaving these three strands of weird, which represent the past, which is called Urd, which means origins, and the present, which is called Verdandi, which means immediacy or right now. Because as you know, there really is only the present. The present is an ever experiencing now. There really isn't a past or a future. That's our experience, but there's really only the present. And then the future was called Schuld. We use it today in the word should. We say you should do this, you should do that. And what it means is you have a debt to pay, because Schuld means debt. So when you live in the right here and the right now, in Verdandi, the ever experiencing now, you make decisions and you take actions, but it's the decisions that are most important. And the decisions, let's say to believe, let's say if you want to believe that the universe is an evil, cruel place, if you make the decision to believe that, that becomes written in your urd, or your past, which then forces you to go into a future where you have to pay that out. So they saw that our thoughts and our feelings, but especially our decisions on what to believe and the actions that we took, determined our past, which created our future. And these are the three strands of weird that come together. And this three strands of weird are actually made up of what we would call life force energy, or prana, or chi. So this is where magic comes in for them. For them, magic was in the moment, to be conscious of everything that you're thinking and feeling, and that you are responsible for all of the beliefs that you choose to hold on to in every moment. Because think about it, our history, if you asked me, where did I come from? And so I gave you this history of myself. But the truth is that's just a memory. There's no reality to that except that I keep playing it in my head, which keeps creating this past, which then I have to live out. My name's Michael William Denney. I'm 55 years old, blah, 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 blah. But the real wizards were able to stay in this ever-present now, where they took responsibility for everything that they thought and they felt, and that was how they were able to change reality. And that's where we get, we see them as wizards or vidkis, those who see. So it's a subject I could talk about for hours, and you can tell how excited I am.
I bet, for sure.
It contains within it the understanding of karma. Karma, we talk about karma all the time, but that's only one piece of it. We talk about dharma all the time, which is one piece of it. But it contains all of those spiritual laws that people, give themselves to in, spiritual practices. So, yeah.
It's wonderful, Jay, watching you smoke a cigarette on cam. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. We got a cigarette cam on his. He's his thing messed up or something, so he's having to use his phone or something. But it's weird. But nonetheless, it's great to have you here on this subject. I mean, it's a subject that's not the easiest to find people on. We've had a few, but I mean, I love it, and there's something to it. I've had several psychics tell me I was a Viking in a past life, which I don't know if that's true, but I've had them say it. Some lady once told me I was Dracula in a past life, too. I was Napoleon too. Just kidding. But I do collect Dracula stuff though. But I'm not going to go as far as to say that. But I may have dragon energy. There's something to that. I think I have Earth energy, being a Capricorn and all that. Were there like Norse signs? Did they mess with astrology at all or anything like that?
I don't know to what degree that they did. There is an interesting fact. Like when you watch like Mickey Mouse cartoons and the wizard has this like conical hat with all of the moon and star shapes on it. And we use that like if we make fun of, like a wizard costume, we'll have with the big cone hats with the stars and the moon on it. That actually existed. And whether or not it was used by the Norse, I don't know, but it was definitely used. We're talking like 2000 BC, and these hats were uncovered, and they actually were like calendars. You could turn them around. They were little machines. You could turn them around so that, the moon thing would go here and the sun thing would go here. And I'm quite certain that they used that to calculate the motion of the heavenly bodies and do all things probably I can't even imagine. But whether the Norse had astrology or not, I don't know. I personally am a Vedic astrologer, so that's part of one of the things that I do, which is the astrology of East India. But whether or not they did astrology, I have to imagine that they did some, because they had stone circles as well. You can find stone circles all over, not just in Britain with the Celts, but you can find it all over Europe. And of course, those were used for, among other things, for the solstices and those kinds of things. But whether or not they practice astrology, I can't say.
Well, I'm a Capricorn, but just out of curiosity, what's your sign?
Well, my sign in Western astrology is a Virgo, and my sign in Vedic astrology is Leo.
Cool. I'm Capricorn. It's pretty weird. The whole pan thing, I've learned a lot about that. It's pretty bizarro, but I'm sticking with it. For sure. But that leads me, I love trickster type stuff. I love Coyote, the Native American stuff. Those stories are so bizarre and perverted and just strange, but hilarious and neat. But I know there's Loki, and there's so many different things and perceptions of him. Like I've seen, presentations on YouTube saying that Christianity took, him and made him into Satan on some level. I don't know if that's true, but I've seen, people talking about it. But I mean, on a lot of levels with Vikings and Norse, he wasn't really considered evil, but just a mischief maker, or was he considered it? Did they go around saying, don't say Loki's name, in the village square or whatever? I mean, what was the perception of Loki?
That's a great question. My belief is that it was probably mixed. And the reason for that is because Loki is an agent of change. And so imagine the guy who says, listen, the only way that's going to get these people to evolve is if I pretend to be whatever. And what you find in the mythology is that Loki is seen by the other gods as being all of those things, cunning, deceitful, weak, all those things. But when you look at what he does, he plays these tricks in order to give the gods their weapons. So the gods, like Thor's hammer and Odin's spear, all of the magical weapons of the gods, Loki got through his trickster activities. And there's one myth in particular that I find really interesting, which is the flighting of Loki, which is, flighting means, like, when you get into a banter with somebody, you get into, they used to do that back then. They would get into these, arguments, but they were very artful sort of arguments. In any case, what ended up happening is that, that's a different myth. I'm sorry about that. The myth of where Balder goes to the underworld. Balder is the sun god. He represents the soul. And Balder was a deity he was invincible. His name means bold. And he was invincible. And what the gods used to do is they would sit around and they would party and they would drink mead and they would get shit-faced. And then they would go, hey, let's throw a fireball at Balder, and they would throw their swords at him, they'd throw knives at him, and they'd throw boulders at him, and it would just, like Superman, it would just bounce off of him or explode. And they thought that was hilarious and they'd laugh. Loki hated this. And the reason why he hated this is because he understood that Balder was the soul. He represented the human soul. And he thought that was so disrespectful that he created this deception where he went to Balder's brother, who means ignorance. And he says, why aren't you, throwing things at Balder? And his brother says, I'm blind. He says, don't worry, I'll help you out. Why don't you shoot this arrow at him? And what he did is he put a sprig of mistletoe. Mistletoe is the only being that the mother of Balder didn't force into promising they wouldn't harm him. That's why he was invincible. The mother of the universe went around to all of the beings and made them promise they would never harm Balder, except for mistletoe, because mistletoe was too young. It wasn't able to take responsibility for its promises. So Loki put that on the tip of the arrow and held it back and aimed it for Hodor, which means ignorance, and let it go. That's what killed Balder. Now, we could get upset and say Loki is responsible for the death of Balder, the sun god who made everybody happy. But what he was trying to show was that you cannot take the soul for granted. And these are the kinds of lessons that Loki brings. And of course, he's going to piss a lot of people off. But if you're able, my experience with Loki is that if you sit down with him and you just don't hold anything back, don't try and pretend to be anything, and just talk to him one-on-one, he'll share with you the secrets of the universe. But if you try and puff yourself up and be inauthentic, then he's going to play tricks on you. And I have one experience I heard from a friend of mine who, they were some neo-heathens. And there's a lot of neo-heathens that don't speak the name of Loki because, like Christians, they think Loki is the devil. And so they were out in a park, and they were gathered around, and one of them said, oh, what the hell? And he screamed out, Loki. And out from the forest, which was right next to them, came this skunk, and it came in the middle of them and sprayed all of them and then ran away. And so that's, for them, they said, you see, you can't trust Loki, he's evil. And I thought to myself, if it was a rattlesnake or something that came out and bit a child and killed it, then yeah. But no, all he did was spray you and make you smell bad. He was making fun of your ignorance and your fear, is the way I look at it. So I don't see Loki as evil. I believe that it's probable that back then people were of mixed understanding like they are now, because my experience of Loki is Loki, and many of the gods as well. How you experience Loki is going to reveal how comfortable you are with your own darkness, your own fear, your own, are you completely honest with yourself? Because if you can really look at yourself with all of your defects and all of your faults and be okay with it, then Loki is not going to be a problem for you. If you are lying to yourself, if you're insecure, if you're out there pretending to be something that you're not, if you lie to people and make fun of other people, then he is going to teach you through the school of hard knocks by deceiving you through your own greed, your own misunderstanding. So, to answer your question, I think they saw him like people do now. It all depends on, your own personal bias.
I find him very interesting, and definitely. But the trickster thing, I find it fascinating. And, they talk about it a lot in the UFO subject as well, like some of these UFO things that happen, also like some weird sightings of cryptids and stuff. I mean, there seems to be like kind of a trickster energy present with some of that stuff for sure. Well, I'm kind of curious. When it comes to Ragnarok, do you think that's already happened, or it's gonna happen, or it's happening right now? It kind of feels like right now. But I'm just kind of curious, what's your perception on Ragnarok?
That's a great question. I think the best way for me to answer that is to look at reality in a holographic way. If we try and look at reality and history in a literal progression, then it's hard to pinpoint when is Ragnarok. Because we could say Ragnarok happened when Christianity wiped out the original religion. We could say that. We each go through our own Ragnarok whenever we go through challenging transformation. You went through some of that already in the story that you shared. That could have been one of your Ragnaroks. I don't think that that Ragnarok hasn't happened yet. In other words, I think it's possible there might be a Ragnarok coming. And I do think that we might be in the middle of Ragnarok, because one of the things Ragnarok, they say, is that, men's minds will go dark and brothers will fight against brother and, some really awful things like that, which is kind of what I see going on now. From a Vedic astrological perspective, what's happened is that we have just come out of what is known as Kali Yuga, which is the age of darkness. And we are entering in Dvapara Yuga, which means half and half. So it means half of the population is waking up and the other half is still asleep. And so what do you see everywhere? In politics, in society, in economics, everywhere we see this absolute rift like I've never seen before. I mean, everything is so polarized now. So, we could be making our way out of Ragnarok if we look at it from a Vedic perspective. But to be honest with you, I'm not fixed. I don't have a fixed idea. I like the idea of, it's a hologram, and Ragnarok is something that happens every day within us, or happens in every lifetime.
Is it the Big Bang? Is that what
Big Bang could definitely have been. Yeah, I mean, who knows? That could have been the Ragnarok of the previous age, for all we know.
Well, it's interesting you talk about Balder and the connection to the sun and the soul, because I've talked about seeing these bodies because I've seen them and stuff, but I think it's what, I don't say for sure, but I think it's like what we all are on some level. I guess it is their soul I'm seeing, but there's definitely a sun connection. I have weird sun stuff happen to me all the time. It's like the sun's like paying attention to my chrome dome or something is what it feels like. But, what do you think about that? Is that kind of like what we are? And I've had people say they've seen deceased loved ones glowing. And I mean, what are these light beings? Have you had any of that come up at all, or anything like that? Luminous beings?
Well, I haven't. I think I've chosen not to. Years back, I said to the universe, "Listen, I don't want to see stuff. I don't want to get freaked out," because I was doing some really intense stuff. So, but I have had an out-of-body experience where I went to, what people express when they talk about near-death experience, where they go into the light. And my experience was exactly that my essence was this infinite light that was brighter. It happened when I was a little kid, and the words were that if I were to look at this with my eyes would burn out of their socket. That's how I remembered it. So I believe that is our essence. I believe that our essence is light that is so intense and so bright that we can't even comprehend it. Now, the other experience I had was an absolute orgasmic joy. I mean, it was when I went into this light and I was absorbed by it, this feeling of joy came over me. I'm getting chills when I'm talking about it, where it was so intense. The bliss was so intense, it was almost too much. And then I got used to it.
Yeah.
And then when I was leaving, because then the light receded and I was getting pulled back into my body, I was saying, no, no, I was crying, no, 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 don't go. So I definitely think that's who we are. In terms of Balder, the myth of Balder going to the underworld is a symbol of our infinite soul, this bright light, being trapped underneath this flesh, this earth that we have, this meat bag that we walk around in. And the reason why we mourn Balder is because we mourn our own infinity when we are in the body. And we forget that we've chosen to come here to have a virtual reality experience. We forget that, and we mourn for that infinity.
Definitely. Balder's definitely fascinating. Well, let me get Jay in here with a few questions, and then I'll come back and ask some, but I'll try to give him, balance it out. I try to, but go ahead, Jay. Love it, though. Thanks so much. And I'm still here, but I'll be asking some more, but go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, this is a great show. So I think the first few sentences you said, I was like, oh, I like this guy already. I'm also not a fan of organized religion. But I got a question for you that, based on I can no longer see you with my camera here, but you had a really neat green artwork behind you with some Celtic knotwork. So I wanted to know what you think of the progression of pantheons. Now it's going to tie into your artwork that's behind you on your camera. If you start in the middle of Europe and go backwards in time towards Japan, you get a mostly humanoid pantheon. Almost all the gods are humans. Then you go back a little bit towards England and the Western Europe, and you get sort of a mix. Some of the gods are animalistic, like in Egypt, you get their humanoid bodies with animal heads. Then you go further across the ocean to the North America, and the entire North America, Canada, North America, Alaska, is all the pantheons are all animal. And as you go a little bit further south, Central America, they're going to go back to hybrids of animals and humans. Can you explain why that is? Did you have an opinion on that? And they all seem to also, all the gods seem, whether animal or humanistic, they all seem to have the same role across these different cultures. At some point, never talk to each other.
Yeah. Well, again, I like to look at it from a holographic perspective. Here's some things that I've learned. We see, like, let's take the Hindu gods. The Hindu gods are anthropomorphic most of the time, except for like maybe Ganesha. But most of them, they're humans. But what I have come to find out is that didn't happen until the Middle Ages, and that was because of the influence of Europe. They were trying to copy Europe, and so they were anthropomorphizing their gods. But before that, the gods were represented as mandalas, all of them. Didn't matter who you were worshiping. If you had an idol to Shiva or Lakshmi or whomever, it wouldn't have been a person, it would have been a mandala that was specific to them. So that I found really interesting. What I find interesting, if you go back in the history, Tacitus, who is among the first civilized people who went to the Germanic tribes in Northern Europe, he came back and he said that the Germanic tribes did not worship in temples and they didn't have idols. They worshiped streams and rivers and skies, and they saw the gods were part of that. They didn't. To them, it was so primitive to the Romans that people worshipped like that. So in terms of animals, that brings up a couple of different things because. Then the question is, again, depending on who you talk to, everybody, made their way up through all life forms. So we've all been every single life form. The fact that we're human means that we're at the end, we're getting our PhD in incarnation. And so we've been all these animals in the past. And that's probably why a lot of people have a strong connection with certain totem animals when, they go into trance. The Vikings believed that every person was born with their own animal spirit that was connected to their aura, and wizards could see it. Wizards could see which animal was walking in front of you. and that was your totem. But in terms of, the hybrid stuff, and, now we're starting to get into stuff I honestly don't have any knowledge in, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I don't like being stuck into any box. So if somebody came to me and said that, there are deities that are hybrids between humans and animals, or that we were, or anything like that, none of that would bother me, and it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I have to go with the artwork. It tells the tale. And this is where the tie-in is. The rope artwork you have there looks like there's a Celtic antler or deer creature behind you. If you look at the natural creatures from like the Celtic style and the North American style, like North American Indians, the style of artwork is almost identical. They're distinctly different, but they are very, very close in style. And if you roll that back to ancient Japan in the 14 or 12,000 BCE, well before written history, they started artwork like that. And their name Homon people means artwork people or rope work people. The only difference is that the gods seem to be also similar. So they're depicting something they actually saw. They're not depicting just like fantastic beasts. It's not like the Christian gods. They're tangible creatures that they're depicting in their artwork. Do you agree with that, or you don't think the artwork reflects that?
No, that makes I have no problem with that. What I've found is interesting is that when you go back to about 30,000 years ago, there was a place which is kind of the nexus between Europe and Asia, and right there is where the Europeans split off from what became Native Americans. So that wouldn't surprise me at all if there was an original understanding and worshiping beings, and that being represented in their artwork, which I agree, you see the same kind of stuff all over, so that wouldn't surprise me at all. Then in order to get into that, we'd have to start talking about, specific things, which I don't have any knowledge in, but I have no problem with that theory at all.
Yeah, it just seems to me that across all these cultures that have no contact with each other, there's got to be truth in almost all of these stories. So maybe one day we'll actually get to meet Thor, which would be really cool, because as a matter of fact, Thor Dark World is on the television right now. It's muted, but I can see some of it. But do you actually think we're going to get a visit with actual creatures that were depicted as gods? I don't think they're going to be what we in our imaginations think a god actually is, but do you think that the actual people who were the representation of gods on this planet, the guy who was Thor and the guy who was Moses, even maybe come back here and visit us? Do you think this is possible?
I certainly think it's possible. My brain doesn't go there like there's a flesh and blood guy named Thor. My brain goes to, well, let me give you an example. In the Vedic, they say that the sun sits in the east and worships Indra for long life and the power to rule. Now, what's interesting is that they're saying right there that the sun has an electromagnetic force which keeps it from burning itself out. Now, they weren't modern physicists, so they didn't use those words, but the electromagnetic force is exactly that. And Thor is the barrier between the gods and the giants. He represents the barrier between things like gravity, time, old age, and the gods who represent timeless perfection. And so it is an absolute fact that the sun, at the center of it, the gravity is so intense that if it weren't for the electromagnetic force holding back the gravity, the sun would burn itself out much more quickly. That, to me, is Thor. And there's a consciousness to that. It's the most powerful force in the universe. It's what's keeping me in my chair from falling to the center of the earth. Whether or not that entity, that consciousness, wants to manifest in a form, I'm certainly not going to be somebody to tell him he can't do that.
Yeah, and it sucks when you get old. I had a great question follow up, and I just lost it. So we were talking about what was old age really does suck.
You need me to
remind
get in there?
Yeah, great question, and I just forgot. I usually write them down, but this one came to me in the middle of what he was just talking about. Where did you start off again? Can you just start where you started, and then it might kick in the question.
I think I don't remember exactly where I started, but where I was heading was to talk about the electromagnetic force and how Thor is the defender of the human race. He protects us from the giants of old age and gravity and time. He himself is half giant and half god. That's where I think I started somewhere around there.
Okay, yeah. Now that didn't kick anything in, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that. I wish I could get that question back for you. So if we can go with the different types of religions that are out there, they do happen to all have one common root, and it not is just a god or a supreme being. It's some sort of immortality, and it's the way to get to it is different from each different philosophical point of view. But why is that? I mean, every Bible, and I don't know what the Vedic tradition is or what even the Norse tradition is, but in the Bible it says that man is confined to 120 years of life. That's the maximum. And we're now at a point where most humans are getting to the point where they're dying at 119 and 120 years old.
Yeah.
But what is this? Why do we have this promise of immortality when our bodies don't last but 100 years?
Well, that's a good question. I studied an esoteric Taoist mystical art where they took that literally, and there were people who, according to my teachers, are hundreds of years old, but you can't see them. That you mastered these energetic techniques and you phased out of this particular existence. You're walking around, just people can't see you. Sort of like Jesus's resurrected body. That was part of what they were working towards. But instead of doing it through, faith, they were doing it through an energetic science. The Vedics talk about being able to become immortal, and again, we get into the discussion: is this literal or is it symbolic? But that was definitely part of it, and they have the same idea that a human is given at least 108 years, because 108 is a sacred number because it adds up to 9, and 9 is an incredibly sacred number in the Viking tradition. And I believe that the Viking tradition and the Vedic tradition come from an original root. So I believe that they both believe that, but they also believe in, I'll put it to you this way. Maybe this will answer your question better. I've been thinking about this a lot. The Vikings said that he who dies in battle goes to Valhalla, and he who dies from old age and illness goes to the underworld. Now that sounds weird, but if you understand it from a different perspective, that dying in battle doesn't mean going out and stabbing somebody and being stabbed. It means being willing to die for that, for living in that light, which we were talking about, living your truth, being willing to die to have it. If you live like that, you live forever. And what I've found is that people who live like that don't get sick. They don't get cancer. They don't get, think of whatever it is. They don't get it. And the people who do get sick, a lot of times, I'm not trying to judge anybody, but I can tell, at least speaking for myself, I can definitely see that whenever I've gone through periods of illness, it was when I was out of alignment with my soul and I wasn't living fearlessly. So, it depends on the culture. They were a warrior culture, so that's how they saw it. The Taoists were mystics, so they saw it that way. Christians and the Abrahamic people were people of faith, so they saw it that way. But I definitely believe that anything is possible. I've seen things and experienced things that I can't explain, and nobody's going to talk me out. It didn't happen. And so I believe that there are people who are alive, who are perhaps thousands of years old and didn't die, but I don't think that they're necessarily vibrating on a level that we can see with our naked eye.
That's an interesting theory that they're still here, but they're out of phase. This is like a Star Trek kind of thing where there's a group of aliens that are just like a tenth of a second out of time phase from everyone else, so you can't see them or interact with them. So that's a unique theory. So Yeah, well, I don't know where you came up with that one. That's awesome. I was always of the impression that, I mean, it just sounds like the Christian tradition is that the immortality promised is for this body that we're in, not the soul, not the energy body that Jeff speaks of, but this physical form where we are in now. And that's kind of what I'm wondering is, what do they want? Are we going to be immortal here, or are we going to be immortal in the spirit world as an energy body, and we just keep phasing in and out of this? Because I don't know if that sounds fun to me or not. It's like using a video game all the time. You have to put in another quarter to get back in. You know what I mean?
I do. Well, the way I like to look at it, because first off, I don't have an answer to that question either. But the way that I like to look at it is, instead of looking at it as there's some being or entity or class of beings that are making these decisions for us, I like the idea that we can make the decision. How do we want to do it? Like, what would be your fantasy? Would you like to be one of these guys that's out of phase? Would you like to have your physical body and have that be immortal? Would you like to have your soul escape? I think we have options for all of them. It just depends on how hard we want to work for it. And I think probably the easiest way is just to physically die and have the soul leave. But I think there are methods available for those of us who have the fearlessness to look at ourselves, that if we want, maybe we can have whichever way we choose. I mean, that's how I believe it. I believe that you will experience, not you personally, but one will experience what they choose to believe to be true. And if they continue to invest in that belief, that becomes their urd, their past, which creates their future. So that's why in every moment I'm constantly asking people, like when they come onto my YouTube channel, and especially if they're complaining about how miserable life is, instead of arguing with them, I'll say, do you want to change that? Because if you want to change that, I can help you. Because I honestly believe that we can choose to change how we believe about ourselves. Of course, we're going to have to follow that up with, maybe some change in activities or attitude or behavior, or, maybe even diet or something. I don't know. But you know what I mean? It's the same thing. You can have whatever you want if you're willing to pay the price.
Yeah. It's like the guy in the second Mad Max movie, the bad guy's mechanic. He said, "Speed's just a question of money. How fast do you want to go?"
Yeah.
But also on the immortality thing, the gods have other gifts. It seems across all the pantheons, and no matter what culture you go to, whether it's a technological device or their own physical characteristics, that they can fly, they can swim, they can breathe underwater. These often seem to be, special gifts that they've bestowed upon, demigods and heroes throughout the stories, sometimes in a permanent way. So do you think these are also available? I mean, if immortality is out there, then maybe we can have a legitimate X-Men group.
I think anything is possible. Again, like I said, it's a smorgasbord. It depends on what you want. I mean, I had teachers who would talk about, they could do things that you wouldn't even be, if you saw, you wouldn't believe it. But they were talking about other teachers who would do things like walk through walls and levitate. And, then they would say things like, but who wants to levitate? Who needs that? Do you need that? I don't need that. And so that kind of gave me this idea that, like I said, it's a smorgasbord. So if somebody wants to put their mind into creating some technology, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with aliens and their technology. I have no problem with any of it. The bottom line is it starts with us. It starts with what we're willing to believe and invest in. And if that is you want to make a piece of technology, so be it. If you want to do it just with your own internal energy, so be it. But whether or not the gods' tools are literal or not, again, I like to look at that from a holographic perspective. Let me give you an example. Odin has a spear that he carries, which is magical. And his spear is called Gungnir, which means the swayer. Now, in Sanskrit, the word for Shakti power, the power in the spinal column, is called Shakti, which translates to shake. So swayer and shake and spear all mean the spinal column. So what they're saying in that is that Odin was a master of the Kundalini and the spinal column. And as you know, when Kundalini awakens for a lot of people, they sway, they shake. And so in ancient times on the battlefield, it wasn't swords that were on the front line. It would be hundreds or thousands of guys with these huge spears. And before they go into battle, they would hold their spear next to them and they would start to shake the spear. And if you have thousands of guys shaking their spears, you get this sound of. And so this again, why does Odin have a spear? Does he actually have a spear? I don't know. But I also know that he is the master of creating that power within the human being in the spinal column. So again, for me, I like to look at things holographically, not just in, I don't think anything, just because I see it this way doesn't mean that there isn't an actual physical spear that Odin walks around and carries with him.
Yeah, it seems a lot of stuff is hard to explain. I mean, these advanced gods with primitive weapons. I mean, what did David slay the Goliath with? Just a leather sling. These simple, mindless tools that give great power. And so that goes across the whole thing. Even the sword of King Arthur is a little bit more powerful than a sling, but they all seem to grant some sort of boon. And being Odin, that's what could give his badge office, the spear.
There was my teacher's teacher carried around a stick, and I'm talking about my Taoist teacher. He's a martial artist as well, but he carried a stick with him, and he would sleep with it, like in bed next to him, and he was constantly putting his energy into it. But when he touched you with that, he could make water come out of your hands. He could do all kinds of really weird things with that stick. So, again, there's just so many directions we can go with that.
It's a fascinating thing. The ancient aliens, we talked about that before the show started. They talk about the Anunnaki with these wristwatches, but they don't have any numbers on them. I'm wondering how they get the wristwatch when it can just be a simple bracelet. They try to convolute things, but when you're talking about the gods and their power, these are things that people had to have witnessed. And I think what we're seeing in the artwork and in the stories is their attempt to understand these ancient beings and technologies that just were way over, and probably still are way over our heads today.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, I remember lying in bed and seeing that gray peek behind my bedroom door. So there's stuff out there I can't even possibly get my head around, And that's why again I like to look at it as holographic, because there's going to be stuff that maybe we haven't experienced, and maybe we need to look at things symbolically just to be able to get our heads around it. You might be very right about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you keep saying and mentioning holographic. Recently, people have, and I think this is kind of an offshoot of just people's imagination getting the better of them, because it sounds like the Star Trek holographic room that they have, the holosuite, where they think this reality that we're in is a holographic projection, and then we're all like kind of like Neo in the Matrix, where we're all plugged into this computer, and this isn't reality, and reality is really what your brain and your senses tell you is real. So. What is it? Are we in a computerized simulation, or is this actual reality? This is what it is, and nothing better and nothing more. So that's the big question, and I doubt we'll ever get a conclusion and get the correct answer on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I have my thoughts about it. I think that there's a lot of people out there, and I get a lot of people on my channel who believe that we live in a computer program. Of course, they're looking at it from a negative perspective. They want to escape it, and they see it as a burden and a trap. And again, I try to explain to them the concept of weird and say, if that's how you choose to view it, that's how it's going to be, without a doubt. But if you choose to understand, like I've got a video series called The 5 Rules to Master the Matrix. And what I've learned is that what we call the Matrix, the ancients called Maya. My ancestors called it weird. It means the woven. It means life force energy woven into this cocoon that you live in. And Maya means illusion. And that's the name of the goddess. Her name means illusion. And she creates this illusion for us to live in. And so the question is whether or not you're going to control the illusion or it's going to control you. Whether it's a computer program or not, I don't know, but that's a very good explanation. That's almost, I think, identical to what it is, except I think instead of it just being this empty code, I think that it's living energy that has a code. My experience of the universe is that if you understand what these 5 commands are, the universe has to obey you. And then you're no longer trapped. Then it becomes this virtual reality game where when you understand how the rules work, you get to decide what happens in your world. So again, it all depends, and I think this is the sad part about what has happened with religion, because, I do believe that there was a conspiracy in the age of Pisces. The middle of the age of Pisces was, in fact, the middle of the Kali Yuga, which was in the time where we had the elites and the serfs. There was no middle ground. And so in order to control an empire, you have to control their thinking, and you do that through religion. The word religion means to bind together, like to bind up with a rope and tie up in knots. And I think that's exactly what it is. And the sad part is I believe our ancestors understood that this was an interactive web of reality. And that if we are educated properly, along with given specific techniques, which is why I do Qigong all the time and meditation and mantra and all that, because I'm using it as an energetic science to control my reality and experience this Maya, this matrix. But I refuse to be trapped anywhere. I refuse. And in my experience, that helps. But that's part of the game. That what's built into the game is if you don't, like my ancestors said, live fearlessly, then you end up getting trapped in this fear virus loop and you can't get out. And the whole point of that is that to wake up and go, hang on, I'm not going to let anything or anybody control me. I'm going to choose my destiny. And then we have all these tools. Some people have faith, some people have yoga, some people have martial arts, some people have Qigong, some people have mysticism, magic. Whatever tool you choose to use is a key that will help you not just to exit the matrix, but to control it.
Yeah, I've had sort of similar experiences with lucid dreaming where I'm able to control the dreams, which is, if you follow the physics of what reality is, if your sense to tell you this is real while you're dreaming, whatever you dream is real. So this thing where you can control that aspect of dreaming. But I also have to backtrack a little bit, because I remember the question, I'd lost it a few moments ago. You had spoken earlier about how you thought that all religions were, most philosophies and religions were trying to get to a point where they had all knowledge and they could share all the common knowledge with the entire world. And I don't know if I agree with that, because it seems to me that the Vatican has a great wealth of knowledge they don't seem to share with anyone. Allegedly they have all the entire collected works that were in the Library of Alexandria. Allegedly they have collected works of great master authors in their own handwriting. Books of immense value and technical and literal knowledge that if they were to share it, I think that would be great. But it doesn't seem that they want to share that. Why would they want to do that? Why would a religion, no matter how powerful, wouldn't keep?
That's a great question. And so I need to qualify what I meant by that. I'm making a distinction between the Abrahamic religions and what I would call shamanic religions. So in my books, I have a phrase that I use, which is religions or knowledge or techniques that have an unbroken connection into prehistory. That's what I'm talking about. I believe that the Abrahamic religions have been perverted, that they are, some of it is accurate, some of it is true, and a lot of it is a conspiracy. If there is a conspiracy, it's that. And that's where that's what has been used. The idea that there's this, one being up in heaven who, when you pervert that idea, then he throws you into hell for being mistaken or for, not believing in the right way. And then you control people's minds and they can't think for themselves. So the Vatican, to me, has some connection to maybe those that have perverted the understanding, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they had an entire library full of knowledge that they're not going to share, because once they give it to you, they can't control you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have to agree with you 100%. I've always said that religions are an invention of man that were designed to control the minds and hearts and actions of other men, and there's no other better way to do that than with fear of death, fear of the afterlife, fear of war. I mean, we were talking about this at work the other day. Why war is so profitable. Why don't we stop doing war? Because it creates a lot of profit for everybody involved.
Exactly.
It creates profit for the religion. It creates profit for the government. Not so much for the countries that lose. Sorry, but there's got to be a winner and loser in almost every contest. But it just seems that that's the cash business. Is fear mongering and war, and that's where they get their money from. And the Crusades, or 39 Crusades over 1,000-year period.
Yep.
Lots of money.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that. Absolute, total agreement with that. Yeah, I don't think you want to get me started on that, but yeah.
So it seems like the shamanic religions seem to be more of a pass down of knowledge, whereas the Abrahamic religions are more of retain and control the knowledge.
Yeah, and it's again, at the risk of offending some people, which I may, but let me tell you some true history about the Abrahamic religions. According to archaeology, and I believe the exact date is, I think, 3200 BC. I don't know the exact date, but the Babylonian captivity, which you read about in the Old Testament, that actually took place, but it didn't happen the way it is laid out in the Old Testament. We know archaeologically and historically that the Judean people, right up until the Babylonian captivity, the average rank and file person was a polytheist. They had idols to the Earth Mother and the Sky Father and all of that. But there was a deity of the state whose name was Jehovah. And they believed that as long as his flame was kept lit in the state-sponsored temple, that they would be free from all invaders. And they were a vassal state to the Babylonians at that time. So they had to pay taxes to the Babylonians. So the elites, the rulers and the priests decided they didn't want to do that anymore, and they rebelled. Babylon said, well, that's not going to work for us. And they came down with their armies. They wiped out the temple and they put out the flame. Then they took the elites and the religious leaders off and took them to Babylon for 70 years. That's the Babylonian captivity. It was during those 70 years, and even biblical scholars will tell you that that's when the Old Testament was written. It was at that time they came back with this new religion that said that, you know what? Jehovah, he was supposed to protect us. He was the state God. He was supposed to protect us from being overrun and conquered. He must be a jealous God. So let's wipe out all of these other gods. And they made up this history about being taken out of Egypt and all of that. But the truth is that the Judeans were actually the descendants of the original. What were the people that came in? They went into the Canaanites. The Canaanites are the Judeans. There's no separation. They rewrote their whole history to promote this empirical way, and this is why the Romans co-opted Abrahamic religion, because it worked perfectly to keep a empire going, and that's why it went into Christianity and all of that. So it doesn't mean, that that everything in the Abrahamic tradition is wrong. For instance, the original word for Jehovah was Elohim. Elohim is the plural of the gods. And it's the exact word that the Canaanites used for the council of the gods, the Elohim. So anyway, again, you got to be careful when you get me on some of these subjects, because I go off. And I know it. I know a lot of people aren't going to want to hear it, and it's going to piss them off, and they're going to, but I'm interested in the truth. I only want to know the truth. I don't care about anything else. And I was a devout Christian. And I remember walking and praying to Jesus and saying, I want to know the truth, whatever that is. Whatever that is, I want to know the truth. And not too long after that is when the whole thing started coming apart for me.
Yeah, I have to agree. Early on, I was brought up Catholic as well, and I haven't practiced since. Well, I mean, I was forced to go to church a lot, but I stopped believing in the religion when I was like 10 or 11, and it's about around the same time I started researching UFOs and Bigfoot and so on. Not that there's any correlation to that, but that's just when things flipped.
Jay saw a Bigfoot.
Yeah, I did see Bigfoot. That's for
I
sure.
I heard Bigfoot. I had an experience with Bigfoot myself, so I'm a firm believer in that. And that
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me at all because what I heard was not of this universe. It scared the crap. It scared me more than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And I've had some frightening experiences, but nothing frightened me more than whatever the hell that was that I heard.
Well, here's the thing. We had that Bill J. Bean on. That's his site, by the way. And we were talking about Nephilim and Bigfoot and the Bible and the giants. And of course, you have giants in the Bible. You also have giants in Norse. But what's interesting, I've always wondered if Bigfoot is that, but what he said, this is creepy. He said that basically satanic like aliens come down and do experiments with animals and make hybrid beings and weird stuff, which I don't know if that's true, but it's creepy from a horror movie perspective for sure. But there's a lot of weird cryptid, sightings that are bizarre. And what if that's what they are? He said they're from the Nephilim bloodline. That was the last show. It was pretty creepy with an exorcist. But here's the thing. Bigfoot, there's a hairy king in the Bible. And that King of Saul or something, I can forget his name. He had like hoofs and was hairy and stuff. But I wonder about this giant subject a lot. Is Bigfoot these giants?
Yeah.
And a lot of these Christian preachers are saying the Nephilim are going to like rise up, and like Game of Thrones, the giants are going to come, and that's an interesting subject, especially if you tie in the Bigfoot thing with it. It's kind of creepy for sure.
Well, and it's it's like I said, everybody's got some measure of truth, and it depends on the glasses that they wear, because people interpret with whatever glasses that they're wearing at the time. So I can say that what I experienced out there scared me so bad that I would have no problem imagining somebody believing that to be the devil or something evil. I don't know what it was, other than it was not part of our reality. And in the Norse tradition, they have different kinds of giants. There are the Ettins or the Jotuns, which are like the forces of gravity and time. And then there are Thyrses and trolls. And they talk about how the trolls would come out of the forest and grab people and take them back into the forest. And, we hear stories of Bigfoot doing that. And in fact, I have a flute here that is supposed to either ward off the trolls or attract them. I can't remember which, but Bigfoot is said to be attracted to things like children and people having sex, and those kinds of sounds seems to attract them. So it wouldn't surprise me if somebody had created a flute in order to pacify the trolls out in the forest.
It's definitely weird, man, for sure.
Yeah.
But I've had enough people. I have a book about Bigfoot. It's Praise for the Hairy Man, Secret Life of Bigfoot. It's just interviews with people about Bigfoot that are like, very serious, like they're out there looking. I've been invited to look. I'm like, I ain't going out there. It's too hot. I'll die. But I'm in Florida. And it's hot today, and it's gonna.
Yeah, and you guys got a version of Bigfoot down there, don't you? The skunk ape.
Yeah, he's like Ginger Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Ginger Bigfoot for sure. But I guess the giants returning. It's weird that Christianity says weird stuff. Like if you look up Steve Quayle and stuff, supposedly there's like Antarctica giants and they're gonna rise up, and Revelation and all this stuff. It's just strange. That's a strange subject for sure. If you tie it all into everything. But Jay, do you have another question, or you want me to get some more in here?
Oh no, if you want to go on, yeah, I was just gonna go on back to the religion thing, but we can move on. The Giants thing is actually a pretty good subject. That I hadn't heard about the Giants in Antarctica. Where did you hear that? Go on about that one.
No, oh, that's I mean, just look up Antarctica. There's all kinds of. They think something's there that's controlling everybody, some alien race. I mean, it stems
The
from.
alien race, yeah, I didn't hear about
Yeah.
giants, but
Well, I
yeah,
mean,
definitely.
Nephilim, alien giants. Come on, man. No, you know, down there in Antarctica in the Hollow Earth that there are Bigfoots riding dinosaurs.
I
So,
want to see that. I want to see that. Be a front
Sam
row ticket to that.
Sam Raimi is making a movie called Bermuda Triangle with Ryan Reynolds, and basically it's about the Bermuda Triangle, and they get sucked down there, and there's Vikings and Nazis and dinosaurs. I can't wait for the trailer. I gotta see that for sure. That's gonna be gold. Uh, well, I guess the Norse subject is definitely. I mean, I feel a drawing to it. I mean, yeah, there's power in it. In a lot of ways, I wonder if like Christianity hijacked it and stole most of it. And it's hard. I mean, to think of it like that, but it seems like it on some level. And it's weird when some of the days, I mean, are named after. Are they all Norse gods that the days are named after? Or no?
Yeah, except for Saturday, which is, of course, Saturn. They took that from the Roman tradition. But yeah, Moon Day, Tuesday. Tu is the god of the sky father. Woden's Day, Wednesday. Thunra's Day, which is Thor's Day. Frigga's Day, which is Friday, and then there's Saturday, and then Sunday, the sun. So yeah, that we still say that. We still say the word weird every day. When we let's say, for example, anytime we experience something that is strange or different or frightening or unusual, we say that's weird. But if you
You're
know
weird.
what the word weird meant, then back in the day when something happened that was unexplainable, when they said that's weird, they weren't saying that's unexplainable. They were saying, no, that's the law of the universe. We just don't understand it. That's weird.
It's funny you say that because I recently got engaged and I've hung out with my fiance Tracy, some of her friends, and some of the things that I've gotten. Like I mean, this is me, and I'm from Georgia, but I've been going to Alabama and just hanging out with some people that she knows there. But some of the descriptions of me have been, I'm not country. I give off weird energy. I get that one a lot. And just that I'm weird. That's what I mean. But I mean, I don't do anything bad. I'm nice as I'm like Mr. Rogers. I don't, I'm not violent. I haven't been in a fight since high school, but man, I get the weird thing. Oh, I've gotten that forever in a day.
That's a compliment. That's like saying that you're a man of power. A man of weird is a man of power. That's a compliment. They just don't realize they're complimenting.
Well, here's something. Okay, for instance, there was someone that was going through some stuff, and I was at their house, and I said a prayer, and I used Yahweh, and I said it out loud and held hands, which was the first time I've ever done that, and I was very nervous, but I had a vision of angels fighting snakes there, and I told the person, and it related to something that they had seen in their studies and stuff. But and when, of course, when I came back after that, a lot of like drama broke out with her side of the family and stuff, and me. And a lot of it, I haven't done anything. Like, really, I haven't done anything. I've been perfectly nice, but I guess it's just my demeanor. I don't know. But I guess I wanted to ask you about, first off, one thing, anxiety. I'm curious to how you deal with that. I constantly deal with it. And another thing about relationships, it seems like I've always had trouble in them on some level, and recently I've met someone that's gone really good, but then there's family drama, and I'm not going to go into details. That I mean, it's like they just instantly don't like me, and I haven't done anything at all. I mean, I've been kind, and that happens a lot, but when it comes to relationships and strife and male and female communication, I'd like to get into that and some of your cures for anxiety, so to speak.
Well, that's a big subject as well. Let me just get it. When it comes to things like getting along with in-laws, being a Vedic astrologer, it's possible that there could be some karmic stuff that's attached, and you can see that in a chart that, you're going to be able to see how you'll interact with people's in-laws or your in-laws. But when we talk about male and female, this is something that I believe that, again, something we've lost in modern times. And I mean, in the past 2,000 years. And so when it comes to, I've got a book that's called How to Keep a Man. And in that, it was written from my perspective about how men and women communicate differently. Let me give you an example. Now, if you and I were hanging out at your place and we were watching, Lord of the Rings or something, and if you wanted me to help you by taking out the trash, you would say, "Hey, Mike, will you take out the trash for me?" And I would say, "Sure." And I'd get up and I'd take out the trash. A woman isn't going to do that. She is going to, in the kitchen, while she's banging things around, she is going to say, "Do you want to take out the trash?" Now, a stupid man is going to say, he's going to take it literally, and he's going to go, "No, I don't. I don't want to take out the trash. I'm watching Lord of the Rings right now." And that's the kind of stuff I did when I was a young man. They'd ask me, "Do you want to do this?" And I'd say, "No." And then they'd get all pissed off at me. And I didn't know what the hell I did wrong. But it comes down to understanding how each of these energies respond. So again, we're talking generally, you haven't asked me anything specific, but from a general perspective, the woman's, here's the thing. Let me put it to you this way. Sorry. When I do relationship counseling, here's what I hear from both sides. The main thing I hear from women is, "I just wish I could depend on him." The main thing I hear from men is, "I just wish she would stop nagging me." Those are the two things. Now, that is important because what we're seeing here is the essence of the male and the female that is doing its job, but it's a little bit out of sync. Because the woman's, and I don't mean this, everybody's on the spectrum, but the feminine, let's put it that way. The feminine's job is to reflect back to the male his highest vibration. When she does that, then he will want to win the world for her. He'll say, "You give me so much power, I can do anything because of you." And the other side of it is, if a man is strong within himself, which is what women say when they mean, "I wish I could just depend on him." If he has strength within himself, then she is motivated to surround him with her energy. And we can see the lovemaking process here. She is stimulated to surround him with her energy, which makes him stronger, makes him firmer. When this energetic balance is out of whack, then we go into the default where women attack men and criticize them, and men don't want to support their partner. And you can see the circle here. If a guy feels like he's getting his nuts cut off, every 10 seconds because she's trying to empower him, but she's doing it badly because she's criticizing him, then his first reaction is he doesn't want to give to her. He doesn't want to be there for her. He doesn't want to support her, and he wants to leave. So I know that's really broad and general, and what the hell do I do with that? But
it's helpful.
I found that in any kind of fight with a woman, I try and just listen and see, where am I in this, and how can I get that back? And I'll end my comment with this. I dated a girl from the South when I was in my 20s. She was from Arkansas, and I came over to her house once, and I won't get into it, but I liked to sleep by myself. I didn't like to sleep in somebody else's bed. She brought me over to her house, and she had a spare bed, and she said, "I bought you a gift." And I said, "That wasn't for me. That was for you." And I would catch her in these things where she was trying to get me to do what she wanted, and I'd catch her in it. And she said, in a thick Arkansas accent, she says, "Well, Mama always taught me if you want a man to do something, you make him think it's his idea." Mm-hmm. That is the feminine. That is the essence of the feminine. She wants to do that. If the man isn't strong enough to elicit the proper response, or if she isn't powerful enough in her femininity, then you end up with the undependable guy and the bitchy woman.
I've heard a lot of things like women are embodying masculinity more and men feminine and stuff, and I don't know if that's true, but maybe it is. I mean, one thing I think I've come in touch more with the feminine. I've always heard Capricorn was a feminine sign, but when I was 17, I lost a testicle. I've always wondered if that kind of took away. I jokingly say God neutered me so I wouldn't be a serial killer, but I'm kidding. But well, I joke about that, but oh. It's just it's a tough one. I mean, a relationship and two being together and connecting and maintaining, and the
Yeah.
way the world is right now, stress wise, everyone I speak to is just stressed out, and it's money.
Yeah.
And I mean, the situation with, not to get into politics, but if you keep up with everything right now, it's completely insane. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
hoping we live through the summer at this point.
Yeah.
But we need a Viking Berserker crew, and we need to just do it, do it. Modern Vikings. But
Yeah.
one thing, oh, I know what I want to talk to you about. Berserkers, Viking berserkers, berserker. There was a story I saw in a documentary about where that came from, and I know I've heard different things like they took shrooms in the moon, and that's where werewolf and some of that stuff came from. But there's one particular story that I cannot remember exactly the names, but maybe it sounds familiar. Something about a berserker warrior in history on a bridge fending off a lot of troops, and then they got him underneath. Does that sound familiar or anything?
I haven't heard that particular story. No.
Okay, it was in some like weird, obscure Viking documentary, which I mean,
Well,
it was
yeah,
yeah.
I believe it. Here's what I know about berserker. There's berserkers, and then there's Ulfhednar. And berserker means bear shirt. And so they would literally wear bear pelts, and they might have had a bear, cap or something. But what was really happening is that they were taking on the spirit of the bear. So it sounds almost Native American. They were taking on the spirit of the bear, and then they go on into battle. And they were said to be, fearless warriors and unstoppable and all that. And then there's the Ulfhednar, which they would wear the wolf head. They would wear the wolf head, and the same thing. They would be embodied with the spirit of the wolf. And I remember reading some account. I can't remember where. I wish, sometimes I wish I'd pay more attention, but I remember reading some historical account of a wizard who, when the army went into battle, he went into his tent and he put himself into a trance, and he went into a dream state. And while he was in the dream state, people saw bears and wolves on the battlefield destroying the enemy. And when he woke up, the bears and wolves disappeared. So berserk, bear shirt, and wolf head, these were people who definitely believed that they were possessed, if you want to use that word, with the spirit of the wolf or the bear. And so I have no problem with any story of some berserker standing on a bridge, fending off a whole army. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Definitely. It was on some weird obscure history channel. I forget the name of some odd channel on cable or something, but I wish I could find it again. It was pretty cool. But I know I have that book Sea Wolves, and it's supposed to be the Viking history, and I'm having trouble with the guy's name, but I know I was reading about Ragnar and stuff, and he claimed like something about magic breeches or something. Does that sound familiar with any of the Ragnar people? Something about magic pants?
I'm not familiar with him particularly, but I do know of a magical, really crazy, we would consider it black magic. There was this crazy magical thing where, you wear the skin of an enemy, and I mean, all kinds of really weird, gross stuff I won't get into, but, it's like serial killer novel or something like that. So,
Yeah.
but none of that surprises me either. The things that we sadly we don't remember is that the Norse people had very deep magic, really crazy, crazy deep magic that we have since lost. And it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest because I have seen in some of the magical books talk about what we would call magical breaches.
Yeah, I saw something weird about skin, like it was something necromancy. I don't remember what it
Yeah,
was on
yeah.
Facebook or something. Necro, I just like that
They
word.
did some crazy stuff. I mean, I won't lie to you, stuff that I wouldn't consider doing, but they did it.
Oh, I know. What about anxiety? I can't remember. I don't know if you got into that. But what are some methods that you personally use for anxiety?
Well, besides, talking with friends and talking with mentors and people like that, there is a practice that I've learned which is called the Hool breath. If anybody wants to look it up, you can just look it up. You won't find it anywhere, but this is something that was given to me. It's spelled Huul breath. And it's a very simple meditative technique which actually connects you to the frequency of the earth, which is 9.6 hertz. And if you do this breath, my experience is that immediately takes away the anxiety. So that's worked really well for me. But other than that, listen, I'm a human being. So when I get really messed up, I go to my teachers and my friends, and I'm not averse to going to a psychologist if I need it. So, in terms of those are the three most practical things that I can share with you about that. Getting that garbage out. I'll talk about it like this. We have what's called an unconscious. We have three minds. We have a conscious mind, a subconscious. 99.9% of the time when people use the word subconscious, they mean unconscious. We also have this mind, which is the unconscious. The unconscious is the stuff that we're not aware of. And we have unresolved conflict. This for me is the source of all of my anxiety. So I do what I can to try and find out what that is. If I can't figure out what that is, then I do things like the Hool breath and energy work. So again, I hope that answered your question.
Definitely. And I just want to give out my site, churchofmabusradio.com. That's Church of MABUS radio.com. And we end at 5 till. I hope that's okay. Unless you need to go, let us know. But we'll at 5 till is when we end the show, Michael. But give us your website and how do people get to your channel?
Yes. My channel is thunderwizard.com on YouTube. Thunderwizard, DOTCOM. Spell it all out. Go on YouTube. You'll find it. My main website, because I have so many websites that I have, is courses.thunderwizard.com. So COURSES, like courses at school. Courses.thunderwizard.com. If you go there, you can find links to all of my websites and my books and my DVDs and everything else.
Okay, are you good for 15 more minutes, or do
Sure.
you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let me see what else is on the itinerary in my brain for a second. Oh, I know what I want to ask you about. Have you seen? What do you think of Vikings, the show? I know it's not accurate on a lot of levels, but have you watched it at all?
Of course, multiple times. I mean, there's so many things
love
about it I love. There are some things that bug the crap out of me. Like in the beginning, it was hard to get into because they started from this assumption that the Norse people and the Anglo-Saxons couldn't understand each other. And Anglo-Saxon and Old Norse are virtually identical languages. That bugged the crap out of me. It also bothered me that somehow these Norse people didn't know what was to the west of them, that there was this magical land called Britain, and they didn't know anything about it. That bugged the crap out of me. Of course, they knew where Britain was, and all that. But those kinds of things bothered me. But I quickly got over that because I think they had a lot of really cool, accurate stuff. Having to do with the religion, and I think they portrayed that really well. And I think they portrayed, the mysticism of all of it. And of course, the women were really hot, and watching them walk around with, swords, and I couldn't help but enjoy that. So
that's good. Yeah, I enjoy it. And I guess what is the leopard? He's like what does he consider? What would you?
They made that guy up. That they made the whole thing of them licking his hand and all that crap. That's the guy you're talking about. That they made that up, and they even say, if you go look, they'll say, yeah, we were just filming, and one day somebody licked his hand, and So yeah, that's got no connection to, what they used to have was, in Norse societies, they had a vitki, which means wise one, which comes from the verb to see, so they had a seer. And so he was basically, the shaman of the village. And he wasn't some blind, weird guy that it wasn't that. Anyway, look, it makes for good television, so who cares? But
Yeah, I enjoy it, and I didn't like when Ragnar croaked, but I mean, I guess they had to do it. But Ivar is pretty cool, and now he's like going insane. He's kind of like Trumpelgooching on us now, all out Trumpelgooch. But nonetheless, I mean, I enjoy it. I know there's going to be one more season, and that's it. There may be a spinoff because it's so successful. So one thing I did gather from it is that Wardruna. I love that. I could listen to that all forever. I know you've heard of them, I'm sure. I love their music.
There's another group that's really cool, Hedningarna. They're really cool too. They use ancient musical instruments. So one of their older albums I really like.
I think I've seen that. I'll try to spell it. There you go.
Yeah, it's Hednin, Garner or something like that. Hedningarner. It means the heathens.
Nice, for sure. And what is Floki on that? Is that kind of the Loki? I mean, that's what it seems like, right? I mean, the Loki situation.
I think Floki is its own name, but they definitely have him acting the Loki persona for sure. He's definitely playing a Loki character. But yeah, I like him too. I think he's got a great character as well. Yeah, and for me, in order to enjoy it, I used to be an actor. I was a Hollywood actor years ago. So in order for me to enjoy any kind of movies, I can't, start looking at the acting or the writing because then I get too critical of it. But yeah, he's a great character. I love watching him.
I enjoy it. What kind of stuff did you do when you acted?
I had a theater company in Hollywood, and I produced and directed and acted there, and I did movies and television bit parts here and there. I do have, if anybody wants to look it up, they can see me 20 years ago, and I was playing a kickboxer. If you type in Shadow Glories, you'll see me in all of my glory in the ring fighting a woman. It's really weird.
Nice. I'll tell you my only experience on camera. Stacy Brown, he's on Finding Bigfoot all the time. He wanted me in this Roswell documentary, and he came out to my house with a camera. And he kind of looks like Jesus from The Walking Dead or something, but he's got the camera on me, and I'm holding this alien with plastic guts talking about Roswell. And I was nervous. Like the night before, I couldn't hardly sleep. I felt like and then during it, with that camera on you, I have a dog near me that's making noises. But during the camera on me, I felt like I was going to crawl out of my skin. It just made me nervous. But he said I did a really good job, but then something happened with their tech stuff, so they didn't use it. Like the mic was shut off or a defunct mic or something, so they didn't use it. That was my only experience, but I think I'm good with that. Those places never want to pay you or anything. They just want to get you. They do. I've had different ones. Yeah, that's Joe Montaldo. He's on Ancient Aliens. He's an Ancient Aliens hoe. But he owns United Public Radio. Of course, he's on there all the time. But I'm kind of curious. I mean, have you ever thought about writing a book or anything? Or are you going to ever do a book for him?
I have 13 books.
13. I pulled up your Amazon page. That's right. But tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I started with the book, The Thunder Wizard Path, and that was written because I'll tell you the story about that. It's actually really interesting. I was studying with the Taoist masters, and there was this political problem, and politics and sects and all that. And I got kicked out of the sect. And I was very upset because I felt like I was on the verge of, reaching mastery in that. And so around that same time, I thought I would try and finish my training. Maybe I was looking into Mongolian shamanism, and I thought maybe that would be something. And I ran into this guy on YouTube who was a Native American. He was just some Native American kid in college, and he was going off about white people stealing his culture, and that people who were trying to learn shamanism were stealing his culture. And I got furious, and for days I walked around furious at that kid, and I stopped and I went, hang on, why am I so upset? He's right. He's right. Somebody did that, has stolen my ethnic knowledge. I'm having to learn this in other places and other cultures, which I love, but why don't I have something available to me? So as I was walking in the forest, I was talking to my guides, and I said, listen, you guys called me to this path. I didn't ask for it. You called me to it, and now you've taken it away from me. So I said, it's up to you. If you want to teach me, it's up to you. And then I did something, I don't know where it came from, but I said something off the cuff, and I said, if there are any ascended masters of my ethnic tradition who want to teach me, I'm open to learning from you. And as soon as I said that, this air came around me that just was charged. And I felt this presence say to me, I didn't hear a voice or anything, but I felt this presence say, are you sure? Because if we teach you, there will be no going back. And I understood that kind of language because when I teach people really high-level esoteric stuff, I give them that speech. And I say, you have to know what you're getting into because this is going to bring up all of your demons and all of your crap. And if you can't face it, don't do it. So as soon as I heard that, I knew what that meant. And I said, yes. And then I felt the presence say, okay, hold on, here it comes. And then it was gone as soon as it had been upon me. And I went, well, that was weird. And then over the next few days, I started getting these downloads. And the best way I can describe it is that, like when you download something off the internet, they come, what do you call that? They come in like these packages and you have to, what do you call those things? When you get like, not files, but compressed files, you know what I mean?
Zip files.
Zip files. And so what ended up happening is I was getting downloaded these zip files that I understood on a really deep level, but I couldn't put into words. It was beyond my ability to put into words. And I saw this connection between all these different cultures and all these different religions and all these different energetic sciences. And it was driving me crazy. So I had to write it in a book to unpack the files. And so the first, I don't know how many books, were this unpacking of files. And that's what started where I'm at now. And so there was a point during that time where I did a ritual and I called upon, whatever ancestors were out there. And I said, listen, I'm creating this synthesis of knowledge from multiple places. And I said, I just want to make sure that, is this what you guys want? I don't want to be one of those typical white guys who's going around and, hijacking other people's cultures and pretending that it's something else. I said, I want to know that I'm doing what you guys want. And I won't tell you how, but I definitely got the message, yes, that's what we've been trying to do. You went through all of this teaching and you learned from the Africans and you learned from the East Asians and the Indians and all of these people so that you would be able to go back and understand your own ethnic mythology and find the true science that all humans once had years ago. And so those are some of what my books are about. You can start with The Path of the Thunder Wizard, and then I've got 3 books on the runes, and I've got books on thunder shamanism, and I've got some other books where I rant and rave about religion and other things like that. So you can go to courses.thunderwizard.com and look for the books link, and you can peruse that if you'd like.
I'm definitely going to pick up some for sure. I've really enjoyed it, and I love the subject of shamanism. I've had lots of different. I had Jose Stevens on, or Jose. I always say his name wrong. He did Secrets of Shamanism. It's Jose, and then Jose. And he's been on. I was just reading one of his other books, which was Awaken the Inner Shaman. That's really good. Don Ruiz, and there's been a bunch, but it's glad to have you with the itinerary, and I definitely want to get you back on. I've enjoyed it so much, and definitely just want to say thanks. And do you want to give out your links again? I mean, to make sure.
Yeah, my privilege. So thunderwizard.com on YouTube, Thunderwizard, DOTCOM, type that out on YouTube. You'll see my channel. Go to courses.thunderwizard.com. And that will take you to all of my links. And of course, there's just thunderwizard.com if you want to go straight into learning the master course in shamanism. And by the way, thank you for having me. It's been an honor and a privilege. And I will definitely come back if you invite me. No questions asked.
Thanks so much. And I had to turn off my window unit so it don't make so much noise on this microphone. So I'm sure me smashing my face neurotically and then Jay doing weird stuff with his knee and cigarettes is a blast. Fear and loathing in Florida, baby. That's right. But I've enjoyed it so much. Thanks, Michael. And I'm great to meet you. And I would like to talk to you more in email about stuff too. But we'll get you back on. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, well, take care, everybody. You're listening to United Public Radio 107.7 FM. And